Now, you may have heard me mention on this channel before that I missed Thunderbirds toys. So the only Gerry Anderson toys that I was around for in toy buying, toy playing with mode were Terrahawks. Gerry Anderson's Terrahawks actually ran for 3 years. I looked it up recently, about 83 while 86, that sort of time period. And the toys were by Bandai, which was interesting to me because I've been looking at Thunderbirds toys recently, and 10 years after the Terrahawks kind of time, Bandai were doing Thunderbirds toys. But interestingly, Terrahawks actually came first. Now, Bandai may well have done other toys that were Gerry Anderson related before that, but not in the UK that I'm aware of. So this, as far as I'm aware, was their sort of entry into the Gerry Anderson licensing. But again, it's interesting because it's Bandai Poppy on the toys. So I've got a few of them now that I've sort of reacquired. So I'm going to delve into them with you. So you better stay on this channel. If you're into your Terrahawks, you'll get that reference. So, Terrahawks, a Gerry Anderson, Christopher Burr production, which was quite different in some respects to earlier Gerry Anderson works. For a start, it came out in the 1980s, which was relatively unusual because a lot of its work was from a lot earlier than that. But it was also presented a different style of puppetry than had been used previously in Anderson shows. So you'll be familiar with the likes of Thunderbirds and Stingray. They used marionette puppets, which are controlled from above by strings. But with Terrahawks, they flipped it. So they were actually controlled underneath. So they were more like sort of Jim Henson Muppet type figures, in that they were controlled with, now I'm going to say they were rod puppets, but I'm not actually sure about that. I might be thinking of Starfleet here, but suffice it to say that they didn't use strings. So they were a very different style, but it did mean that they could sort of move around perhaps a little better than was obviously the case with the stringed puppets. So quite different faces as well. But I mean, I always found the faces incredibly well done and realistic, probably because they were more rubberized than had been the case with the Thunderbirds figures. So, in that sense, it was a real sort of step up. But a lot of the tropes, if you like, that were introduced by Thunderbirds were there. All the sort of elaborate launch sequences for the craft themselves looking very, very futuristic. Even for the 80s, it was still, very, very well done. But all the sort of model work was exactly what you would expect from an Anderson show, albeit with a few more special effects, perhaps, or at least different special effects, because it was that little bit later. Now, this is a very early DVD. It doesn't even cover the entire series, of which there are 3. So there are 39 episodes. So it ran from 83 through to 86, I believe it was. So it was quite long-lived as kids' series go. It's 13 episodes to a season. And it was also a bit different from Thunderbirds and what had gone before, in that it took itself a little less seriously than they had. Now, I was very much in toy age when Terrahawks came out. And therefore I did, I did enjoy the toys that came with it. But I'm not sure, if I'm perfectly honest, that I actually enjoyed the show itself quite as much. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it bounced around in the schedules, or that I thought it wasn't quite as serious as I liked my science fiction even then, if that makes sense. It was just a little bit on the silly side at times, and perhaps I didn't like that so much because even when I was quite little, I liked stuff that took itself seriously. No change there. Nevertheless, it is very fondly remembered, and there's good old Zelda, of course, who everybody likes to call everybody else's mum, basically. You understand what I mean by that, don't you? But basically, Zelda's looks became a standing insult in that era. So it was unfortunate if someone called someone else Zelda, because they didn't mean the Nintendo character. They probably meant this one. So as you can see, sort of 3 DVD set. Now in the modern era, of course, these all vanish, and we end up with this, which I haven't even got out of its cellophane yet. But this is a complete series of Terrahawks on Blu-ray, all sorts of snazzy extras and stuff in here, which I haven't yet had a chance to sort of sit down and have a look at, but it is available. Now, I had a bit of a Fanderson binge. It's actually the Anderson website, because they are still making a lot of merchandise for Terrahawks. It's still quite a live license from their point of view, at least. So what I want to do is show you some of the original toys now, and then I'm going to show you the written and artistic works that were produced and how they've come around again. So let's start with the toys. I do not have a full Terrahawks toy collection, because that would be very expensive in this day and age, and this is all stuff that I rebought. None of my Terrahawks toys survived with me, I'm afraid. So you might have already seen this chap. This is Hero, who manned Space Hawk. I picked him up in a lot from Monkey's Emporium a little while ago now, not that long ago at all, so you might have seen him recently. Pretty standard, fairly low articulation sort of figure, but he does look the part. He's got quite nice detailing. You can sort of see his Terrahawks emblem on his upper chest there, and he's got his sort of hand weapon is on his arm. So this is quite a nice complete example of him. As you can see, he's got fairly sort of standard Star Warsy sort of holes in the feet if you want to display him. So good looking figure. These days he looks a bit like Harry Potter, but he predated him. So he had a bit of a sort of a lisp kind of thing going on, and was very generally portrayed as being quite Japanese, and he talked to plants on the space station. It's all quite weird in a nice sort of way. Now, in addition to him, I've also picked these up recently. And these are quite interesting because these give you an idea of the packaging. So what we have here is Dr. Ninestein, the leader of the Terrahawks, called Ninestein because he's a clone, and there are 9 of them. So a lot of the episodes used to be written by people like Einzwei Dreistein. I actually made that one up myself. I'm quite proud of that one. No, you can't have it. But this was an indication of the tone of the series, that they made up the writers' names. Basically, they used pseudonyms that were entertaining for the purposes of being entertaining. Lieutenant Hawkeye, to my knowledge, is about the only figure who actually gets a great big gun as part of his package. So, and he was, appropriately enough, the gunner on Hawkwing. So him having a heavy weapon isn't actually that much of a stretch. And I think his wrist weapon is there as well. Sometimes they're missing their belts. These belts are sort of, I say they're detachable. I'm not sure if they're intended to detach, but I've seen many figures without them. And you can see on the back here, this is the range. Now, I have seen most of these in the recent past at toy fairs and on eBay. On eBay, this sort of example is quite expensive. This came from BT's originally. Nice, doesn't exist anymore. So we've got a couple of Zeroids. So we've got Space Sergeant 101, and we've got Sergeant Major Zero, Windsor Davis's character. Brilliant. Zelda, yeah, inevitably. Hero, Ninestein, Hawkeye, Mary Falconer, Kate Kestrel. So quite a nice reference point if you want to know sort of the main characters from Terrahawks, and obviously a single baddie there. Now, as you can see, Bandai. All of the Terrahawks ships were by Bandai. This is not that surprising because 10 years later, also, they'd been making Thunderbirds craft. And, Bandai had a lot of fingers in a lot of pies, it seems, in terms of licensing stuff. So they jumped on the Terrahawks, Gerry Anderson bandwagon, pretty early doors. And interestingly, I've noticed that a lot of the, or at least one of the Terrahawks vehicles that I've seen is actually Bandai Poppy. And I've in fact discovered recently that Poppy was actually a subsidiary of Bandai. And you can see the packaging here is pretty poor, but that's why these were relatively affordable. I got all of these for the price that you would normally pay for a single carded figure, effectively. So, you know, from the point of view of showing the packaging to you, I thought this was a pretty good deal. So I see Neinstein. I'm not sure about his hair colour here. Whoops! Oh, brilliant! There he goes. He's making his bid for freedom. Feels quite rubbery actually, but as he's escaped his packaging, there he is. So exactly the same sort of weapon as Hero, but I think his hair colouring is more like the leader of UFO rather than. You can just about make out the Bandai on his back there as well. Actually, in fact, it says Bandai Poppy on him as well. Isn't that interesting? Because I say it's interesting because I've just done some research on Poppy, and the Poppy subsidiary made a lot of really nice models, some of which I have. You've probably seen my God Phoenix rebuild already, but Bandai actually reabsorbed Poppy back into the main Bandai company in about '83. So these may well have been amongst the last Poppy branded figures that Bandai produced, because obviously this is just labelled as Bandai. There's no reference to Poppy actually being in the production, and yet they are labelled as Poppy and Bandai on the back. So it's an interesting one, that one. So it may have been just a little odd, quirky coincidence of life that, you know, these were actually the last sort of Poppy branded toys that were ever produced. It's possible. It's possible. So those were the figures. Now, in that particular lot, I also got this. Now, this is a little tiny Treehawk, but this is really interesting because there were there are actually a lot more vehicles released than I thought there were in varying different sizes. So this is arguably the smallest of the sort of the general range. So these are called Action Diecast and Plastic. So there's an ejecting nose section, all of £3.95. Again, Bandai, Terrahawks symbol there, and that sort of classic kind of Terrahawks branding there. But again, on the back here, you get this very useful breakdown of all the vehicles of this size, of this type that they were producing. So they were producing Hawkwing, they were producing Battle Tank, Space Hawk, Terrahawk, and Battle Hawk with an even smaller Terrahawk on it, because that's where Terrahawk launches from in the series. So, there are half a dozen there that you can collect if your pocket money is severely limited. I suspect this would probably come out if I wanted it to, although it's fairly well on its card still. I don't think that's ever actually been out, so I'm not going to extract it now. But what I will do, as it's here, is show you this. And this is an interesting comparison. This is the Treehawk that comes from a substantially larger box, which would have come with a badge and missiles, because there are missile launchers concealed under these winglets here. Now, if you're not familiar, Treehawk was the single stage to orbit ship that Hero there used to go up to Space Hawk from the Gerry Anderson's, from the Terrahawks ground base. So again, you can see here, if I can focus in for you, Bandai Poppy. Again, and this was actually the first time I'd noticed it, made in Singapore. So Anderson Burr Pictures Limited. Now this has actually got quite a lot of detail to it, more than you might think. But this is not unusual because it is, after all, a Bandai product. But it has landing gear. So there are landing gear tucked away in here. And I have to say, this one smelt something chronic when I got it out. But it's one of the first times in a long time I've had a really sort of smelly package arrive courtesy of an eBay seller. But it just seems to have worn off a bit now. So maybe it was more the packaging than the actual item itself, which I'm definitely happy about. But as you can see, these are still here. It's got some damage to it, some wear. It's not perfect, but I didn't pay a perfect kind of price for it, so that's okay. I'm all right with that. But as you can see, it's got 3 landing gear. It's got a nose that still shoots forward when it wants to. The cockpit is still there. I don't have any missiles, but you can see that the missile launchers were there, mounted, sort of hidden underneath the wings. Little bit of damage there. There should be another fin there. That wasn't in the pictures. I just didn't notice it, to be fair. But as I say, at that price, I wasn't expecting perfection. But it's a good size, and it is partly metal. So there is some real weight to that, and I would really expect that from a Bandai/Poppy product, because their quality is generally right on the money. And I'll tell you an interesting tale about another one that I can show you in a moment, but just thought it'd be interesting to show you that. But I will also show you these. Now, this I was not looking for, but if you have a look on the channel, you'll see that I've been frequenting some toy fairs of late. And last time I went to Doncaster, I came away with this. As you can see, that's 3 for the price of 1. But this is the traditional Terrahawks packaging. Now I've just shown you that there because you can see here there's a Treehawk as part of this 3-pack. And it's nowhere near as big as the big one there, admittedly. But I'm pretty sure that it is bigger than that one. So it's a kind of curious mix of sizes. These little sort of pullbacky sort of ones were obviously that much smaller. But they're still. I'm just looking at it sort of side on. It's still very detailed. It's not just a hunk of plastic. They've actually tried. It's got the Terrahawk symbol on it on the nose and all that sort of good stuff, as they say. So yeah, it's good. Considering how much you weren't paying for it, relatively speaking, I don't think that was too bad a deal, really. But this one is an example of the biggest size that they did. So I guess you call this the sort of the equivalent of the DX, the sort of deluxe size one. Although actually, I'm saying that the models in here, of course, aren't because it's in a 3-pack. But the box is the type of box that the big models came in. And as you can see, it's got this sort of upper flap here. So when it was new and young, that would stand up. And as a sort of an advertising, marketing kind of display, I think they were probably really, really good like that. Now, I haven't actually got this one out. Its side is quite battle damaged, however. So I am going to extract this so I can show you it more clearly out of the cellophane. Now, I think in theory, there would have been some stickers and more packaging in there, but there aren't. Now, I don't think these have actually been off the polystyrene base because they're still attached with their wires, so I won't go any further than that. But the side of the box looks like that. So you get Hawkwing, Space Hawk, Treehawk on the side, and you get a little sort of bit of blurb on all the ships there as well. So it's it's quite sort of, it's a little bit simplistic maybe in some respects, but as I say, there's no missing it. Because it's quite a sort of purple colour to it, you can't miss it. But this again, you see, really, really nicely detailed. Very sort of bright orange to it. This one seems to be in really good condition. It's a slightly faded badge, slightly rippled, but it's still recognisable. And as I say, I didn't pay. I wouldn't say that I paid full whack for this compared to what it can go for. But again, decent Hawkwing. I'm pretty sure I had this set. I'm pretty sure I got this set for a Christmas. Because it's a really good value, obviously, because you get 3 things in it. So Space Hawk, Hawkwing, Treehawk again. So yeah, I mean, nice set. One of the more expensive ones to get, it seems, on eBay these days, but it is around from time to time. So, if that was a sort of intermediate sort of size, this is something else again. And this is I'm not really sure if I'm collecting these yet, but if I were, I'd be going for this sort of size. Now, as you can see, this is huge. If you compare that to this Hawkwing size, and in fact I showed you this when I got this from Monkey's Emporium, you can see that it's vastly huge. And there's an interesting story about this because in this series, they actually used this toy as a Hawkwing, as a sort of backup Hawkwing when they needed another Hawkwing model. They would actually use this. I think they adapted it slightly, but Bandai had the the designs for Terrahawks ahead of time. So although they didn't quite use the final production design, their toys are damn close to being exactly the same as the models as used in the series. And this one in particular, Hawkwing, got modded and used in the series. So, having one of these is really nice. Now, this is quite a faded badge that this one's got. You can tell there's a little bit of yellowing to the window, so I think it's been exposed to the sun at some point. But the actual plastic and so on looks pretty good. The overall box is in much better shape than the previous box. It's got all its flaps are there, and that's the breakdown there of what you could get in this largest size. So there is a Space Hawk up there, which is interesting. I'm trying to think if I've seen that in a large size or not. There is a Zeroid as well, and I've seen him on eBay. That's Sergeant Major Zero, but he's an action Zeroid, that one's described as. So, obviously, the Treehawk I just showed you is this one. And in fact, that's interesting because I thought that was miscoloured in the one that I've got. But actually, I thought it was orange and it sort of lost the orange. But actually, it's the other way round. It's lost some of its silver. Some of the oranges coming through. But that's what it would have looked like fresh. Obviously, this is the one I've got in my hand now. The Battle Hawk is the one that goes for crazy, silly money, or would do if any of them actually sold. So you can see there, it's got a little battle tank underneath it, which is held onto by a hook. But it's also got a small Terrahawk there, which did come away from the main Battle Hawk. And it's got an opening hatch at the back as well. And those were supposed to be little Zeroids there on the side of it. I had that at the time. Great big chunk of metal. You had to watch the wings because they were just plastic, so they could snap off. And the Terrahawk, I've nearly picked one of those up, but I haven't as yet. I can't quite justify paying as single items. They're generally going for about £85 on eBay, often more, but they are getting reduced on occasion that I've seen. So you might get lucky. You could probably pick up a full set around that sort of price as an average, I would say. But I'm quite happy that I've got a sort of a big, reasonably complete Treehawk, and this in particular, obviously, because this is very, very minty. I haven't taken it out of its box. I haven't investigated to see if it's still sealed in its box. In fact, it's come out at one point because it is missing one missile here. You can see most of them do come with missiles on sprues when they're boxed. So do look out for that. If it's missing that, then you're being shortchanged, basically. And they should come with a badge. But it's big. It'll be mainly die cast. This one has silver guns on the front. The smaller one has black guns on the front. So you just sort of want to, if you're looking at it on an auction and you see that coloration difference, that's a good clue as to which version you're looking at. But it's big. I mean, that's a big, big toy. And if you're not familiar with the show, the wing section here, which apparently is called Gunhawk, I've just read, could detach from the lower section of Hawkwing, and then it formed a sort of flying bomb, basically. And the Hawkeye, who was the gunner, could be retrieved from his cockpit, and his cockpit was brought down behind into Hawkwing before the Gunhawk was released. But it had a great big cannon at the front here, and obviously the two smaller guns at the front there as well. So it was like the rapid response craft. It launched from a whirlpool. Oh yeah, that was a thing. That was one of the more sort of exciting launch sequences. So as you can see on the back here, comes out from a whirlpool, a vortex that is formed artificially, and you've got the missiles coming from that central main cannon bit there. Bomb wing separates from main craft, wings are tracking the fuselage, missile can be fired independently. So, all good stuff. Very nice toy to have. And I'm just sort of contemplating whether or not I go after the others really, but that might be more of a long-term thing. I believe there should be stickers and instruction sheets in with them. I haven't looked in the Hawkwing box to see that yet, but I might do that another day. So, I've shown you action figures, and I've shown you the more sort of serious vehicles, but there are also stuff like this. This, ironically, was actually my first pickup of Terrahawks when I was sort of starting in collecting. And this is a battle tank from Battle Hawk, but it's a sort of wind-up zigzag thing, and it doesn't really go. I'll try, but I don't think it really goes. No. But there was this range as well, which was just a kind of wind-up, zigzaggy, silly sort of range. But again, there were quite a few of them released. So if you were trying to get a complete range of Terrahawks toys, you would need to be looking for all the ones like this, which are slightly sort of outsized, but still recognisable. It's got two sort of Megazords there on the front, and the sort of the pickup point for Battle Hawk and its sort of main battery there. Now, again, for the purposes of show and tell, I picked up this battle tank. Now, interestingly, I think this is actually the battle tank that is equivalent to the... I think it's the smallish Terrahawk that I showed you. Some of them did come on individual cards, and this is one of those, but it's very metal, it's very solid. Again, Bandai Poppy on the underside of it there. It's missing the Zeroid tops, that's why it was relatively cheap. But again, die-cast. Probably one of those sort of last toys that was still being produced in metal in the early 80s. So very, very cool. But I don't think this is the one that came from Battle Hawk. This was the standalone version of it that was taking itself fairly seriously. So I think that this is this one from the back of the mini die-cast and plastic range. So I think that is this one. You can see there, because the coloration of that and the sort of design of it seems to be spot on. So it's sort of I don't know what you call it. Not a hook. The opposite to the hook. Whatever the hook picks up. it's this one, I think. So I've inadvertently got two out of that range now. Albeit obviously you couldn't really, unless you could find some way of replacing those. It's not great, but it gives you an idea of the size and from my point of view, the weight of it as well. So I'm going to go down a slightly different route now. I've shown you DVD and Blu-ray, but I'm now going to show you comics. In fact, before I show you comics, I'll show you a book. And this again was actually from Doncaster. Didn't know this existed. Hadn't seen it before because I hadn't been searching for Terrahawk stuff at that point. But this is just a nice little novelisation by Jack Curtis. And I've only read a few pages, but it basically seems to be starting at the beginning of the series. And it's quite sensibly written. It's not sort of particularly childish massively, and I think it will probably go through expect the unexpected the first couple of episodes basically. So quite like that. Now, a lot of people get Terrahawks confused with Starfleet. This is understandable because the puppets are not dissimilar. In fact, they use very, very similar control styles. But of course, one was from Japan, one was from Britain. They just happened, but Starfleet came out just before Terrahawks, so they kind of merge into one another in a lot of people's memories, I think. But this is Starfleet, and just noticed this one's hole punched. That's funny. The reason I'm showing you this is a Starfleet comic, black and white, from Lookin'. Now, Lookin' was a funny sort of magazine that you may remember from the early 80s. And in fact, it was in existence long before that as well. It was quite long running. But as it says there, it's the Junior TV Times magazine. And what it did was it sort of combined articles and comic strips. So it had comic strips based on the popular TV shows of the day, of which Starfleet at the time was one. So if I just flick you through this, I mean, they're quite interesting to look at. So you get people sending their stuff in. Their own drawings. You've got Cannon and Ball in comic strip form. Bucks Fizz article. And On Top of the World. Don't remember that film at all. The Fall Guy. Love The Fall Guy. I believe there's a Fall Guy film coming out, in fact. Everything old is new, as they say. Arnold. E.T. Cola Creams. This is proper old school stuff. Starfleet, nice Mike Noble strip in black and white. Didn't tend to credit who was doing it, but I'm pretty sure that is Mike Noble. In fact, it says there M Noble, so there you go. He is indeed quietly. I think he's probably credited himself there. Then you've got a TV guide, and those are all the TV stations. TVAM, the early morning show, which everyone got. Anglia, Border, Central, Grampian, Granada, HTV for the Welsh. LWT Thames, Scottish. There you go. That's a little blast from the past. That is the Jackson 5, I think. Yep, I think so. Yep, okay. Reading a comic. Good taste. Oh, and TSW and TVS and Tyne Tees and Ulster and Yorkshire. There you go. That was obviously a pull-out. Yeah, that was a pull-out poster, actually. That was a thing with looking as well. Letters, pages, chips. California Highway Patrol officers or something. W.H. Smith, bless them. Yeah, so basically all sorts. Danger Mouse, of course, the first iteration of Danger Mouse there in comic form, greenback, penfold, and all that good stuff. Electronic pocket games. Do you know, it's funny. When I got these look-ins, I was so focused on doing Starfleet, I never actually stopped to think about what else was in them particularly. But I bet there's all sorts of really interesting toy nostalgia in here. I should perhaps that's another thing for another day. Switch on to Dark Crystal, the spellbinding new film at this point in time, of course. Just all sorts of throwbacks in here. It's great. It's great stuff. Values. Box Fizz as well. Yeah, and the kids from Fame. Gina Anthony Ray and Laurie Singer. There you go. I mean, I've got, there are shed loads of these. I think I've still got all of them that were necessary to get every single Starfleet strip scanned in. And there were also, around the same sort of time, of course, we had Terrahawks Storybook. And there are excellent Terrahawks annuals, which gave you all the 10 codes. So if you remember, they used phrases like 1010 and 10-0 and so on. This annual gives you lots of really cool sort of technical facts and specs on all the Terrahawk ships. Text adventures, but also some comic strippy style adventures as well. Not quite as sophisticated as the look-in one, but again, it's quite interesting to see. As an example of what was being done at that sort of time. I'm just trying to think if this is the one that has got. Oh, this is the enemy intelligence reports on Zelda's fleet. So again, quite interesting if you were into the series. I'm sure that one of these has the 10 codes in it. But just really, I mean, I loved annuals back in the day. They were really, really well put together the vast majority of the time. And you got this information, this sort of detail, which you just wouldn't otherwise have got. There's Hudson. There's a toy of Hudson actually as well that I've seen. I think it's just when he's only coloured blue. You could change colour. But he was the sort of Neinstein's vehicle, a Rolls Royce, obviously. Here we go, the Terrahawks 10 code. So 10-0 is negative. Just focus that a little bit in case you can see it. 10-10 affirmative, 10-20 location, 10-30 standing by, 10-40 battle stations, 10-50 launch, 10-90 mayday, 1-0 top secret. So that sort of little sort of extra details you just didn't get unless you had the annual. So that was very, very cool. Now then, skip ahead 40 years, no coincidence obviously, and from the Anderson website, or the Anderson Entertainment website actually from the looks of it, I ordered this, which was a rather nice way of picking up all the Terrahawks comics in one fell swoop, and apparently there weren't that many of them. For some reason it didn't survive in Looking very long, but it was in Looking, hence why I was showing you Lookings just then. So I didn't collect the Lookings that had Terrahawks in, but this is a rather nice book actually, which I've just had a quick look at. So you can see there's dear old Zelda on the front cover. Doesn't mention Starfleet in here because Starfleet has nothing to do with Gerry Anderson. but these are all the sort of the strips. But it's not just the looking strips, because it also goes on then to include all the stuff that I've just shown you that is in the annuals and the storybook is also in here, and it also includes strips which I've only just, and see that there's that page I just showed you reproduced. It also shows you some stories from a little set of books that I've just noticed existing on eBay, which were like little storybooks, a bit like the do you remember the Ladybird Transformers book series? Those little tiny books that you could get, those sorts of things. So it's actually a very, very impressive coming together of all those things, and it looks at some of the illustrator Steve Kite there as well. I think Mike Noble might have been involved. He's mentioned in here, but I think it was in connection with earlier strips like Space 1999 that were also in Looking. So again, Looking's kind of interesting because you've got a lot of extra stories in there, and a lot of just as close as you got to expanded universes, I guess, back in the day. This is brand new. So again, from Entertainment, this is actually a full-on Terrahawks graphic novel called Deep Blue Z. You see how they did there? You see puns. It's such a puntastic show. It's just crazy, but it's nice. It's very, very. It brings in a lot of new Terrahawks ships models. Sort of almost like Thunderbird pod vehicles, actually. So I haven't actually read this all the way through at all, but again, if it's something that you're interested in, that exists as a thing. So I'm going to read through that with some interest, actually, because it'll be interesting to see which sort of direction they went with it. And then finally, I've also picked this up, which is Flaming Thunderbolts, which is the definitive story of Terrahawks by Fred McNamara. So the artwork's brilliant. So I love the way they've done sort of the covers and stuff, and they've obviously kind of reused the original imagery, but just obviously sort of done a touch of the old photoshopping with it to give you this sort of quality. But it looks really, really nice. It's quite funny because it isn't. These are all copyrighted 1983 and 2023. So Zelda actually invaded Mars in 2020. So I guess we're okay because we haven't heard anything. But that was actually the time frame of the original series. So in terms of the future of the past, we're actually past it in this particular occasion. So yeah, it's just I guess this is what we would have had. There were videos as well. Actually, I should mention there were VHS videos. In fact, that was my first re-exposure to the series for a very long time. Was picking up. It must have been about 2001. I found a Terrahawks VHS in a charity shop, and I wasn't even looking for it. It just caught my eye, and you just couldn't get it on any medium at that point in time. I was actually going to have a quick look at this to see when this came out. 2002, I think. That's just me squinting with my glasses, but I think it's 2002. So we really didn't get anything for like 20 years. There was nothing Terrahawksy around. So I'm glad that it's having this sort of slight resurgence, because I think that sort of the technological approach and the fact that a lot of it was based in space, and they used a lot of new characters like Space Samurai and stuff like that. It holds up probably slightly better maybe than things like Thunderbirds do, being that much older. And I don't know, maybe the sort of the silliness factor doesn't work so well because the humour's a bit dated now, but it's still quite clever. It's still pretty, it's funny stuff of its sort. And I say, for me personally, obviously things like sort of the model designs and stuff is really, really cool. So, if you're not familiar with the show, check it out. Pick up the odd toy. I have seen them fairly readily on eBay in boxes. They'll, and it's a good, safe way to get them in one piece, if nothing else. So let me know in the comments if you remember the show. Do like and subscribe as ever, and I'll see you again. Cheers.